Hi everybody, it's Rose Griffin here from ABA Speech. If you're new here, I am a board certified behavior analyst and a speech language pathologist, and I wanted to come on here today and give you a little tip about how to use a skill tracking sheet. I often get asked about how I take data for students with more complex communication disorders or with autism, and so I wanted to share this little strategy that I've been using for a while. And it really helps me organize my data. So when I'm going to write IEP goals and I'm going to write progress reports, this skill tracking sheet really helps me keep everything organized so that when I go to write baselines and I go to write documentation, I have it all right here and it makes it super easy. So I don't use a skill tracking sheet for every student on my caseload. I do take a lot of data. I take data every time that I work with a student because I think it's so important to track specific targets and what I'm working on in therapy so I can make informed decisions about future treatment targets. So for this skill tracking sheet, typically what you see on a skill tracking sheet is the skill area that will be outlined. We're going to go through an example here just so I can talk you through how I use this sheet. Usually also on a skill tracking sheet, you'll have the targeted skill listed. This skill area is labeling. The targeted skill will be the different examples, so you can use it for labeling, you can use it for answering questions, fill in the blanks. You can use it for anything that you want to document what specific examples were worked on. The date introduced, and we call that a baseline. So when you try to get the student to label iPad, when you introduce that to them, can they label it? We call that a baseline, or the date that it was introduced, so you can document that. And then you can document the date that it was mastered. So what is your mastery criterion? That is going to be what is on your IEP objective. So you may have a goal that says, Tom will label 20 new vocabulary words from the curriculum with 90% accuracy over 2 consecutive sessions. So sometimes what I do, especially if I'm using this particular sheet, and I will put a link to where to get this sheet, although if you just put in Google skill tracking sheet ABA, a lot of different ones will come up if you don't like this particular sheet. Now, what I usually write up here, if I'm using this sheet, is I will write what that IEP criterion is. So is it 90% over 2 consecutive sessions? We'll go with that. And so I put that up here so that we know when it is considered mastered. Okay? This has a column for number of days to mastery. That's a nice little bonus. So you can kind of track how long is it taking your learner to master new examples. That's good information to have. So how I use the skill tracking sheet is I put down the skill area. For this particular one, it's labeling. The targeted skill. So for this learner, we introduced iPad. So we were showing him the actual object or a picture. I put the date that it was introduced. This is all pretend data. I just made this up to show you how I use it. And then we work on it in the session, and this team works on it, and then the date that it's mastered is 11/14. Then we introduce bubbles. We're going to work on labeling bubbles. These are things the student likes. We introduced it on 11/15, continue to work on it in therapy. They reach criterion as based on the IEP on 11/28. Then we work on granola. The student loves granola. We start that on 11/29. It's mastered on 12/4. Then what we do, this RR means random rotation. So now we're going to work on labeling iPad, bubbles, and granola in random rotation. We're going to present these photos in a way that we will teach to fluency. When the student sees the picture, he knows to label each one with the appropriate label. That's introduced on 12/4 and it's mastered on 12/10. So why I love this is that when you're working on specific targets with students with more complex needs, we can't just say so-and-so's increased their labeling by 80%. We don't even know what that means. We can't be vague like that. We need to let people know exactly what's going on, what the specific targets are. And then when I go to write an IEP or I go to write a progress report, I just pull out my tracking sheets, which I tend to keep for specific learners who have more intense needs. And it makes it very easy because when I go to report on progress, I can say we worked on labeling this progress period, and the student is able to label iPad, bubbles, and granola in random rotation with 90% accuracy over 2 consecutive sessions. So it really helps me keep organized, and it helps me keep on track, and it lets me know which targets I need to work on during each session for my student. So I just wanted to pop on here today and let you know about this skill tracking sheet. I do have more in-depth information on a webinar about data collection in my TPT store, and I will post a link to that as well. The data webinar is one webinar that's a part of a autism ABA speech boot camp is what I was calling it on my TPT store. So my TPT store is called ABA Speech, and if you pop on there, under the categories, there is an area that says Speech Boot Camp, and it has the 9 webinars listed. Data collection is one of them. Also autism assessment, collaborative services for students with autism, early learner skills for students with autism, and a variety of other webinars that you may find useful. So I hope that you will check those out. If you haven't signed up for my website, I hope that you do. It's www.abaspeech.org. I do monthly freebies, and I'm going to do some free Zoom webinars that will be more in depth than this. But I wanted to pop on here and let you know how I use this. It's really helpful for me. Always, if you have a question, feel free to email me at abaspeech@yahoo.com. So hope that's helpful, and have a good rest of the week.